In MedTech, the difference between a good quarter and a great one isn't always the product. It's the friction standing in the way. Broken sales cycles, misaligned teams, deals that stall at the finish line. Every leader feels it, and the best ones know how to remove it. Welcome to Zero Friction, the podcast where we go inside the minds of MedTech's top commercial leaders to uncover the real barriers they face, the decisions they make, and the systems they build to keep the revenue moving. I'm your host, Terry Kuchaluchis. Let's remove some friction. Welcome to Zero Friction. I'm Terry Kuchaluchis, and I have the great opportunity to have a super guest today, Nathan Castro. He's the co-founder and CTO of Nanacon. He's got a wonderful personal journey, and we'd like to highlight some of the work that his company, Nanacon, is doing in the orthopedic space. So, Nathan, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and the journey of Nanacon.
Sure. Thank you, Terry. Thank you for the opportunity to share our story with you and your audience. Definitely very excited to talk about the work that we're doing and the technology we're developing here at Nanocon. So first and foremost, our company is focused on articular joints, primarily the knee, and looking at addressing what we consider focal cartilage defects in the knee, those that are, not so much compromising the underlying bone, but really affecting what we consider the shock absorbing material of the joint, which is the cartilage. So what we've developed is what we consider a paradigm shifting approach to this problem, where we utilize modern manufacturing technologies like 3D printing with novel materials to create a mechanically robust implant that not only resolves and eliminates time zero pain and discomfort, but also is mechanically robust enough to allow for quicker return to mobility, as well as serves as a substrate and or a scaffold, as most people might be familiar with the term, for cellular attachment, tissue and growth, and subsequent repair. So we're really looking to get a product that not only is a stopgap measure for younger patients who have been subject to traumatic or even to a certain extent chronic cartilage injury, but are looking for a solution that's outside of the scope of total joint arthroplasty, which, as I'm sure you and your audience are well aware, it's very invasive, as well as there's a lot of constraints with going down that path. So we really want to target the core audience of not only your weekend warrior type athletes, but also your everyday patient who, due to injury or due to chronic pain, have to have lifestyle changes that may require them to forego doing activities that they once enjoyed, or tempering down the extent of their activity. And we really want to provide a solution that gets them back to 100% performance.
That's great. Well, tell me a little bit about your journey first, because I think it's a unique one in terms of, becoming an entrepreneur and, looking at all sorts of different types of innovative ways in the medical technology space. So I'd love to learn more about that and how that ties back into Nanacon as well.
Yeah. So, I would say that early on, I was very, very driven to, as it were, be my own boss. Both my grandfathers and my father were small business owners. So you would, routinely find me out at the swap meets on weekends, helping my father sell, at that time, semi-worn shoes or used shoes that he would buy by the truckload from department stores. And we would go on and do secondhand market sales. So, from like the age of 7, 8, all the way to, basically till his passing, I was always involved in his business affairs and trying to modernize what he's doing.
Right.
And that really, set the flame or ignited the flame of my desire to, as it were, serve people, but also, hone my skills in being, learning the nuances of social interactions. So, I didn't really see myself, continuing down that same path that my father had laid, because I had, other other aspirations when I was younger, as most people do. You're always asked, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" At that time, I wanted to be a neurologist and a cardiologist, and I wanted to go into the medical space. And then as I matured into adolescence, I started having knee problems where I would have, slight subluxations or partial dislocations of my knees, and that caused a lot of pain and resulted in me, needing surgery at a younger age. So that in and of itself also served as inspiration to look for ways by which I can kind of address my own personal pain points, but also academically speaking, I would be remiss to say that I've product of really really good mentoring. So through my junior college years, where I started going to school full time while I was working full time in IT. I had a chance encounter with one of my biology professors who, one evening after our biology lab, took notice of me reading an advertisement for a Department of Energy research internship. Just that chance encounter where he mentioned to me that he believed that I would have a good opportunity or a good shot at successfully securing one of those internships. That inspired me to apply. True to his word, I did get accepted, and then that led to my first internship at the Pacific Northwest National Lab out in Southeast Washington State. And in that during that appointment is where I first was introduced into medical technologies. So in that lab, we were looking at chronic non-healing wounds and working in conjunction with the USDA on different cotton-based dressings and seeing how pre-treating or how chemically modifying these cotton gauzes could mediate some of the biology that occurs in chronic non-healing wounds. So that led to me publishing my first paper, being invited to Washington D.C. to attend a premier conference, publishing a chapter in a book. All this during that first year of undergraduate, and then that really just snowballed into opportunity after opportunity, and then I then returned to Texas, was a recipient of an undergraduate research fellowship, which allowed me to do research in the WMCAC Center at the University of Texas at El Paso, which at that time housed the largest number of 3D printing slash additive manufacturing technologies in the country. And, I was part of the small group looking at biomedical applications of 3D printing.
Got it.
My master's thesis was looking at stereolithography or using a laser to cure a liquid resin into a semi-solid material, finding a base material that is biocompatible to then create 3D printed scaffolds
Got it.
for for musculoskeletal applications. And then from there, I moved out to George Washington University in DC, where I did my PhD and really took all of that background in additive manufacturing and soft matter materials and really laid the foundation for that lab, as well as published 40 plus papers along, as a first author and as a co-author with a lot of my colleagues too, looking at musculoskeletal repair. And then all the while, obviously with ideation comes the other side of the coin, which is intellectual property. So through the course of my studies, I was able to generate a bit of IP, which, we were able to participate and take advantage of through participating in the NSF I-Corps program. So for those who are unaware of the I-Corps program, it's a nationwide program supported by the National Science Foundation, and it really allows for academics to, as it were, put their boots on the ground to do customer discovery based on the lean startup approach. And during that time, my co-founder Ben Holmes and I were in the throes of graduate work, and we decided to partake to apply. We got accepted and then participated in the I-Corps program. As you might
Is this for Nanacon? Sort of was the concept of a GW between you and Ben, we're kind of partnering on that opportunity.
Yes. So a lot of my IP was related to materials, and Ben's work was really about morphological influences of scaffolding on cell behavior and tissue repair. So we both participated separately at that time in the ICOR program. I tend to fall back to the scientist in me. So it's hard. It was a little bit more of a difficulty for me to switch gears and speak from a business perspective
Right.
on the technology I was developing. So needless to say, out of the I can't remember at this time the number of participants that were in the cohort, but I'll be honest, I was the lowest performing. So the goal was to have 10 customer interviews per week over 10 weeks to have compile a list, 100 interviews.
That's a lot, by the way. That's a pretty big goal.
Yeah. Yes. And, I think I not even got half of it. Ben, on the other hand, was, the star of the cohort. He exceeded, I believe, that goal. And then, and at the end of the program, we were basically ended on a no-go decision on whether or not we felt that the idea or the IP that we had generated had commercial potential,
right,
or was at least viable to a certain degree. Well, offline, Ben and I chatted and we're like, I think we have something, albeit it might not be the embodiment of what we're both pitching now, but I think we do have something. So we decided to combine efforts and form Nanacon.
okay,
And then that was like I think the third or entering the fourth year of my PhD. So I had a 5-year fellowship. So the last year of my fellowship, I had already completed all of my thesis work and everything. So the last year of my fellowship was really, an opportunity for me to explore outside of the confines of my dissertation. So
right,
that really got me thinking, and through the course of not only my interviews but Ben's interviews, of really highlighting the pain points that some of the surgeons were describing to us. And some
right,
of those were as simple as logistics, having a shelf stable implant that they can readily pull off the shelf and address a cartilage lesion that was either undiagnosed or they felt would be suitable for repair at the time of, during a primary surgery. The other was, volumes and pricing. So a lot of our competitors at that time and now are still cell-based and tissue-based implants
right.
like Macy. So there is a little bit more interest in synthetics now than I think at that time. But at Nanocon we really laid the foundation for something extremely unique and that can benefit both the patient and the physician, as well as fit into the economics of
And the clinical
implantable.
benefit and all that. So basically, versus human tissue, which probably takes a little longer to get a hold of, you now have an on-the-shelf, ready-to-go product that is adaptable to multiple, situations, sizes, that type of thing. So it's a great thing. Well, let's lean into Nanocon a little bit and let's talk about this revolutionary opportunity, from a minimally invasive perspective. And let's just talk a little bit about the technology. Let's talk about the problems that you're trying to solve for your customer, the friction points. And then, if we can find some time, maybe we'll get some video in there so our listeners and our viewers can kind of see what's going on there.
Yep, sure. So Nanocon really, kind of just to tie up the last conversation. So, to date or up to the point where Ben and I formed the company, we were really looking at kind of soft matter materials. And the analogy that we like to use is if you imagine the cartilage on your articulating joint as a asphalt paved street, over time and over the course of usage, you start to wear down. So you start to develop potholes. So these potholes are akin to these focal defects that we eventually start to form in our knees or in other articulating joints, and that's just through wear and tear. And pretty much almost everybody will have some level of degeneration of their cartilage. So what at Nanocon, what we're doing is traditionally what would have been done and what is currently also still being done is you're filling that pothole with a material that you presume it's going to be bioactive and that's going to elicit repair and minimize pain. So that can be injectables like steroids. It can be injectables like hydrogels that will solidify in situ, or fibrin glue bioadhesives, things of this nature. But at the end of the day, what you end up having is a mechanical mismatch between the surrounding tissue and what you filled that pothole with. What Nanocon is developing is actually an implant that not only fits true to size to that pothole, but it also has similar mechanical properties to the surrounding tissue. So you don't develop stress concentrations in and around the injury, and you also have a mechanically robust system that allows for minimal pain, allows for better time to recovery, and also gets you back to that more active lifestyle, all the while providing, as I mentioned before, a substrate for cells to attach, tissue to infiltrate, and then ultimately in growth of tissue from the surrounding healthy areas, and thus, really, really repairing the tissue as opposed to just putting a band-aid on, as it were.
Got it.
Yeah. So our first indication, and I should preface by saying that we're not FDA approved yet. We're still investigational. So all this is for scientific understanding. So what we're looking to address are what is referred to as KL scores 0 to 3. So that's really minimal to full cartilage injury. And what makes our product unique is not only can we address one, but we can address multiple lesions in the same joint through the use of different sizing options that we have available. So we have right now are investigating 10 to 20 millimeter, but we also have SKUs that we can, fit additional sizes. And the unique features of our implant are that we have areas by which, and as is illustrated here, allows for efflux and influx of the milieu of the surrounding blood, as well as the synovium that will penetrate into the scaffold through these pores. And as is illustrated here, elicits tissue to attach, cells to attach, mature, and then allows for tissue to infiltrate it and grow and fill the void space. Along with the implant, we've also developed a really, really elegant instrument set that prepares the patient's joint to receive our unique design features. So the implant itself does not require any third-party fixation, nor does it require any type of bioadhesive. It is purely mechanically fixed into the joint. So as is common with arthroscopic delivery, prepare the injury site. We have our introducer, which pushes the implant in, and then it sits just slightly recessed into the joint to allow for 100% contact with the surrounding neighboring tissue for tissue integration and growth.
Oh, that's an amazing piece of technology, and frankly, what an elegant delivery system too. So it really looks like a end-to-end system. You've got the right sizes, you've got the right tools to get it in there and get it secured and make sure that you have successful procedures. So it looks like you're well on your way. So where do you stand today in terms of getting this thing ready for market, getting it in the hands of physicians so patients can someday actually take advantage of this wonderful new minimally-invasive approach?
Yes. So right now, even through our website or through clinicaltrials.org, we have a safety study that we've started up in Canada through the Health Canada system.
Okay.
So this is
So for those of you out there that have friends in Canada who have knee problems, I'm sure they can go to your website and find a way to find a research facility there too. So that would be a great thing. So I just wanted to add that in there real quick, Nathan, because I know that's a big part of getting onto your journey is getting the right patients into
mhm,
these studies so that you can prove your safety, can prove your efficacy, and then begin your regulatory pathway here in the U.S.
correct. Yeah. Yeah. So you know, we will be doing the safety study. So looking at several provinces in Canada. And then once we obtained early readout data, as well as combining that with some ongoing preclinical large animal work, we'll submit to the FDA to apply for our phase 1 clinical trial. So hopefully that will occur sometime in 2027. So looking to enroll a larger cohort of patients, bring up multiple sites. So a lot of exciting work ongoing and very, I would say, milestone moments for us as a company because, I failed to mention the timeline that we were operating on. So we founded the company in 2016. Ben was really, instrumental in maintaining the organization afloat while I was overseas, supporting myself through multiple postdocs as well as returning domestically.
Right.
But I was returned full time to Nanacon in October of 2020. So, been working full time and really made a lot of headway and a lot of progress in the last 6 years, which I think is reflected in the success we've been having in our fundraising efforts. Each round of funding that we've opened it's been oversubscribed, and you know through the course of these years, even though I'm not as intimately involved in the fundraising itself, I hear the chatter of how difficult fundraising at least at this levels can be, and that we're one of the don't want to say an outlier, but we've been able to maintain a lot of interest from a lot.
Well, it certainly serves a lot of purpose, right? So that's the one thing. And the alternative is something much more archaic and barbaric and, implants and, cutting of bone and, all sorts of major surgeries that come with all sorts of major complications and infection rates. And, does the implant actually, you know, work together with the body? Does the body reject the implant and all those types of things? So I think that's a
Hmm.
wonderful purpose to bring. What have been some of the frictions that you've had in terms of like bringing this thing forward along the way? Where were your friction points? And, maybe you have a friction point now. Maybe there's a friction point that you're anticipating. Would
Hmm.
you tell our listeners about the friction points and maybe how you've sort of overcome some of that stuff as well?
Yeah, I think kind of taking it back to the early days, the original work that I did. So, as I mentioned before, most of my work was on soft matter materials, and this, the material that we're using for Nanocon is definitely not in that category. So, trying to convince, my advisor or as we're fundraising, key decision makers who have the capital to invest, really, really creating the compelling story that's data driven. So, we definitely do not want to follow the path of Theranos and, overselling and under delivering it. And in any sense of the word, we definitely leverage and rely almost 100% on the data that we're gathering through both funded projects as well as other projects that I oversee. That first set of experiments that I did to really investigate this material um, was I purchased the material myself. As a PhD student, you don't really get a healthy stipend, especially living in DC. So I took it upon myself because I just I just needed to answer my own question, like, is this material viable or not?
Is it legit,
So
right? Is it
yeah,
really going to make
so I took it upon myself, bought materials, did the work, and you know, truth be told, we did see some promise,
Right.
and then that really is what became the core IP of Nanocon as we move forward, was this material combined with the original design elements that Ben was investigating, as well as teaming up with a spec developer in these later years to really refine the implant design and the tolerances to bring it to the embodiment that it is now.
And I'm sure that 3D printing really, I'm sure it adds to the efficiency, effectiveness, keeping the cost structure in the right way. Because just getting something built, that's going to be one part, getting it approved, and then just like anything in healthcare, unfortunately, you have to find a way to get a pathway to money so that you have your healthcare facilities and your implanters and your payment systems are all motivated to support the therapy with reimbursement. Without those pathways and the market access, that makes it even more challenging. Even if it's a great product and a great outcome, if the Medicare is not paying for it, I'm guessing that Medicare is probably a great proportion mix of this population that would get this type of therapy. You need to make sure that you get those things in mind too. But very, very exciting, man. Like this is something for a guy who's been a runner for a long part of his life and has knee problems. And I know I've probably worn a bunch of cartilage out of my knee. It'll be nice to know that, down the road, there'll be something there for me later that can, kind of keep me on my way and not push me into, an arthroplasty or something along those lines. One kind of as we close things and wrap things up a little bit here. So the next phases are getting through Canada, presenting that data to the FDA, building your regulatory pathway. When do you think something like this can actually eventually get to market in the U.S.?
So we're in the U.S., we're probably looking around 2029. So if we're able to start our enrollment of our RCT in 27, we'll do a 2-year follow-up. Hopefully we'll receive. So we're pursuing a PMA route because, truth be told, there are no predicates that allow us to go through the 510K pathway. What has helped us is that, we were awarded a breakthrough device designation.
That's awesome. That helps.
Some time ago. So that allows us to interact with the agency a little bit more frequent and a little more efficiently, albeit, the real blunt holes in the tent are, the testing required to prove safety and efficacy, both preclinically and clinically. But, we are looking to, I don't want to say fast track, but we're exploring options by which we can, do a soft commercial launch in Canada, once we get fully enrolled in our safety study. So there may be
nice to get some other reps
possibilities.
too. That's good. That's excellent. Well, wrapping things up, I have one question for you, and it's a surprise question, but what would Nathan Castro tell his 18-year-old self in terms of, life advice?
Oof. I mean, I would probably tell myself to, keep being fearless, and fearless in the context of, not being afraid to fail. As an entrepreneur, as a scientist, you go through experimentation, you go through trials and errors, and, I'm sure almost all, graduate students will echo this, is that you fail 100 times more than you succeed. But what keeps you motivated are those successes, and that's what's kept me motivated. So, not being afraid to fail, and not being afraid in general, obviously within certain constraints and calculations.
Sure.
So I don't want to find one of your listeners jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. But
well, as a scientist, you have to calculate something, right, Nathan?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, that's awesome. I think that's great advice. Don't let fear get in the way of tomorrow. And I think that's a good sentiment to take. So Nathan
Hmm.
Castro, I really truly appreciate your time today. What a great story personally, and what a great story for Nanacon as well. I'm sure we wish you all the best and the greatest success. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
That's a wrap on Zero Friction, the show built around one simple idea. Remove the barriers and the revenue will follow. If today's conversation was valuable, please subscribe and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. That's how we will grow this community. I'm Terry Kuchaluchis, Revenue Architect powered by AI. Come find me at my website, myrevrx.com, and let's talk about what friction is costing you and your organization. Until next time, keep removing the barriers and keep the revenue flowing.